Hey everyone, I hope you're having an amazing day. Today, we're diving into a story full of family secrets, betrayal, and shocking twists. What happens when Lynn, the once ostracized older sister, returns and begins secretly manipulating everything around Tu Tieu and Uri? Will she succeed in taking over the farm and tearing the family apart? Stick around because this one is full of suspense you won't see coming. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next chapters of this gripping story. Lynn walked out of prison with the calm confidence of someone who knew the world would welcome her back. The moment the gates closed behind her, the media went wild. The person who had stepped forward to confess to the farm arson had vanished without a trace, and with no suspect left, Lynn suddenly transformed, almost overnight, into a tragic figure. Newspapers called her the wronged elder sister. Talk shows replayed her tear-streaked photos, and the public showered her with sympathy. But while everyone else celebrated her innocence, Uri felt something entirely different. A weight in his chest, a tension behind his ribs, that uncomfortable instinct that said, something here doesn't add up. Meanwhile, Tu Tieu, soft-hearted, gentle, and still emotionally tied to the sister who raised her, held a quiet belief that Lynn might be innocent. She didn't defend Lynn. She didn't argue with Uri. It was just a fragile hope. The kind you cling to when you're not ready to accept that the person who once protected you could also be the one who might hurt you. And then Lynn returned, not with loud declarations, anger, or tears. No, that would have been too easy to read. Instead, she came back with silence, a carefully measured softness, and a smile calibrated for each person she faced. The moment she stepped back into the company, she greeted Tu Tieu with the warm, affectionate expression of a long-lost sister. She brushed a strand of hair from Tu Tieu's shoulder, held her hands, asked about the baby. Every gesture rehearsed, every sentence designed to rebuild closeness. But when her eyes shifted to Uri, the smile faded, just a little, just enough for him to notice. From that moment, Lynn began manipulating the environment around her, quietly, surgically, without ever appearing hostile. She played the perfect role, soft-spoken, respectful, calm, almost humble. Whenever people asked about the past, she would sigh gently, then reply with a voice dipped in sorrow. Everyone's afraid of old events. Maybe Uri is just uncomfortable because I'm back. I understand. No accusation, no complaint. Just enough lingering sadness to make Uri look defensive in comparison. And sometimes, when the timing was perfect, Lynn would stage small, harmless situations. Things that made Uri appear like the aggressor. A misplaced document here. A suspicious email thread there. A conversation she accidentally overheard. Slowly, people at the company started whispering that maybe Uri was too harsh, too paranoid. Maybe he was the problem. Meanwhile, Tu Tieu stood in this invisible crossfire. She wanted to trust Uri, but whenever she saw Lynn looking tired or hurt, that old affection tugged at her heart. But Uri wasn't guessing. He was investigating. And what he found made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The person who had confessed to the arson had no family ties to Lynn, had no business with her, had no connection whatsoever, and then disappeared off the face of the earth. Uri followed the faint digital footprint left behind, digging through old transactions until he discovered something that made his stomach drop. The payoff for the scapegoat came from an anonymous wallet. And that same wallet had shown up in a previous investigation involving a shadowy organization Yuri had been tracking. That was when he knew. Lynn wasn't just innocent. She was orchestrating from the shadows. Days passed. The company moved around them like nothing was happening, unaware of the quiet war brewing beneath the surface. And then, late one evening, when most employees had gone home, Uri sat alone in his office, staring at the evidence glowing on his laptop screen. His thoughts were loud, restless, heavy. A soft knock broke the silence. He looked up. Lynn stepped inside. Gone was the gentleness she put on for Tu Tieu. Gone was the sympathy she displayed for the public. Her expression sharpened, cold, calculating, the expression of someone who knew she was winning. "Uri," she said, closing the door behind her, "my sister is very naive. Please stop frightening her, or we all lose." Yuri leaned back, eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Lynn?" She walked closer, slow and steady, like she had all the time in the world, like she was speaking to someone already defeated. "What I want is simple," she whispered. "Don't get in my way." For a moment, they just stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then Lynn turned and left, heels clicking in perfect rhythm, each one sounding like a countdown to something Yuri couldn't yet see. But that wasn't the end, because once Lynn got home, the mask slipped completely. She stepped into her room and shut the door with a firm click. In an instant, the sweetness vanished. Her eyes hardened, cold, predatory. On the desk lay a stack of old family documents, land titles, the farm's ownership records, an outdated will from her adoptive parents, and several authorization forms Tu Tieu had signed over the years without reading carefully. Lynn sat down slowly, fingertips brushing across the papers as if she were touching gold. "It's time this family returns to the person who truly deserves it," she murmured, flipping through the pages. Then she found the one she wanted, a contract that, with one additional signature, would give her temporary management rights over the entire estate. She smiled, soft, satisfied, predatory. "One signature," she whispered. "That's all I need." From there, Lynn began phase 1 of her plan, destroying Yuri's support from within the family. She started where it would hurt most. Tu Tieu's mother, Mrs. Lynn. A quiet morning, soft sunlight, the baby gurgling in the background, the perfect setting for a well-planned manipulation. Lynn sat beside Mrs. Lynn, pretending to hesitate before speaking. "Tu Tieu's been exhausted lately," she said gently. "She told me Yuri isn't helping much. She's managing the entire farm alone." Mrs. Lynn frowned immediately. "Yuri said he's been helping her every day." Lynn shrugged with expertly crafted modesty. "I really don't want to meddle in their marriage, but there are things you might not see." Her words were like honey coating a razor. And just like that, suspicion began growing in Mrs. Lynn's mind. But Lynn wasn't finished. Her next move was to tear down Yuri's professional reputation. She quietly contacted people she knew in his network and planted seeds of doubt. He's unstable now. He's stressed. He might do something reckless. She sent anonymous emails accusing him of contract fraud. She arranged unauthorized transactions from his account to make him look legally compromised. Bit by bit, step by step, she worked to make Yuri appear unsafe, someone unfit to live in the same home or farm as Tu Tieu. And while Yuri tried to clear his name, Lynn prepared the final stroke of her trap. One quiet evening, when Tu Tieu was exhausted from taking care of the baby, Lynn approached with a stack of papers. "Sign these for me," she said with a soft smile. "It's just to temporarily transfer the farm's management. I'll handle everything for you. You need rest." Sleep-deprived, overwhelmed, and trusting the sister who once held her through childhood nightmares, Tu Tieu didn't think twice. She signed. Lynn watched the pen glide across the page, the corners of her lips curling upward. "Step 1, she whispered, sliding the papers back into the folder. "Complete." With Tu Tieu's signature in hand, Lynn leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing as she imagined the next phase. She didn't need to rush. She had already begun sowing distrust within the family and undermining Yuri's reputation. All that remained was to apply pressure, push the right buttons, and watch the entire household crumble. Phase 2 involved a subtle tightening of her grip on Tu Tieu's trust. Lynn continued to present herself as a caring older sister, constantly checking in on her sister, offering help with the baby, the farm, and even household finances. To an outsider, it looked innocent, generous, even maternal, but each interaction was laced with manipulation. Every small favor carried with it an invisible leash, a reminder that Tu Tieu now owed Lynn a little more control over the farm with every day that passed. Meanwhile, Yuri could feel the walls closing in. He noticed the tiny discrepancies, financial anomalies, whispered rumors at the company, and subtle complaints that Mrs. Land seemed to take more seriously than ever before. Yuri confronted Lynn directly in private. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, fists clenched, face flushed with frustration. Lynn's lips curved into a calm, almost innocent smile. "Doing what?" she asked lightly. "I'm just helping keep everything in order. You know how much I care for Tu Tieu, don't you?" Yuri's eyes narrowed. He didn't trust her words. He had the evidence. He had the trail of financial manipulation, and yet every public interaction Lynn had with Tu Tieu made him look like the overprotective, paranoid one. And the more he tried to expose her, the more Lynn adapted, covering her tracks and twisting perceptions. Lynn's third phase focused on isolating Yuri and Tu Tieu from external support. She reached out to key partners, investors, and family acquaintances, planting just enough misinformation to make them doubt Yuri's judgment. Every move was calculated to destabilize his influence, while Lynn maintained the appearance of a devoted sister and employee. One afternoon, Lynn arrived at the farm under the guise of helping Tu Tieu organize harvest schedules. She watched quietly as Tu Tieu juggled feeding the baby, checking crops, and managing workers. When Tu Tieu glanced at her sister, a small sigh of relief escaped her lips. She hadn't realized just how exhausted she looked. "That's exactly why I came," Lynn said softly. "Let me handle the scheduling. You shouldn't be doing all this on your own." Tu Tieu smiled faintly, grateful. Lynn's eyes, however, held a hidden gleam. The temporary transfer document she now controlled meant she could influence all major decisions regarding the farm. Step by step, she tightened her control, while Yuri was forced to work twice as hard to counteract the subtle disruption she orchestrated. Yuri confronted Tu Tieu privately one evening. "Do you see what she's doing?" he asked, voice low but urgent. "She's manipulating everything. This farm, our finances, even your mother's perception of me. You can't trust her." Tu Tieu shook her head, conflicted. "I don't know. She's always been my sister. I want to believe her." Yuri's jaw tightened. "Belief doesn't protect us from betrayal. Lynn isn't the person you think she is. Every move she makes is calculated." Days turned into weeks. and Lynn's plan unfolded almost perfectly. She created subtle conflicts, introduced tiny inefficiencies, and instilled doubts in Mrs. Lon about Yuri's commitment to the farm and family. Each incident was small enough to seem accidental, yet compounded to create an overwhelming sense of instability. Finally, the critical moment arrived. Lynn summoned Tu Tieu to her office late one evening. "Sign these papers," Lynn said, her tone almost playful. "It's just to officially transfer temporary management to me while you focus on the baby." Tu Tieu, exhausted and trusting, hesitated only briefly before signing again. "Step 2, Lynn whispered, eyes glinting. "Complete." The following morning, Lynn announced to the farm workers and staff, "From today, I will oversee all operations temporarily. Tu Tieu is resting, and Uri, well, he needs to focus elsewhere." Yuri's fury boiled over. He demanded an explanation, but Lynn smiled sweetly and said, "I'm just helping everyone. You should thank me for keeping things running smoothly while you deal with your other responsibilities." To everyone else, Yuri appeared unreasonable, controlling, and paranoid. Lynn's charm and strategic helpfulness turned the tables. Then Lynn escalated further. She secretly approached local authorities, claiming minor mismanagement concerns and hinting that Yuri's financial inconsistencies could be a legal issue. The combination of internal doubt and external pressure began to corner Yuri and Tu Tieu simultaneously. Tu Tieu started noticing unusual patterns. Crops mismanaged, finances slightly off, and Yuri more tense and withdrawn than ever. Her heart ached, but she couldn't pinpoint Lynn's subtle interference. Every time she confronted Yuri, he became frustrated, leaving her torn between trust for her sister and loyalty to her husband. One evening, Yuri gathered all evidence of Lynn's interference, from forged approvals to manipulated communications, and presented it to Tu Tieu. "See this?" he said, exhaustion lining his face. "She's orchestrating everything from the inside. Our home, our farm, our family. If we don't act now, she'll push us out completely." Tu Tieu's hands trembled. Her trust in Lynn wavered for the first time, but her heart still held a flicker of hope that Lynn wasn't entirely malicious. "That's hard to believe," she whispered. "She's always been my sister." Yuri's voice was steady but sharp. A sister wouldn't do this to drive her own family out. As tension mounted, Lynn watched from her office, a small, knowing smile playing across her lips. Every step she had taken, every whispered word, every calculated favor, every manipulated document was bringing her closer to full control. And yet, the most dangerous part of her plan was still ahead. She intended not only to seize the farm and assets temporarily, but also to fracture the family completely, isolating Tu Tieu from Yuri emotionally while maintaining the public facade of a devoted sister. Every move she made was a chess piece, every word a trap. The game had begun, and in this silent battle, only one question remained. Would Uri and Tu Tieu recognize the threat before it was too late? After being released from prison, Lynn returns under a cloud of suspicion, her public image as the wrong sister, praised by the media. While Tu Tieu quietly hopes she is innocent, Uri's instincts tell him something is off. Lynn immediately begins to manipulate everyone around her, acting gentle and caring toward Tu Tieu, while subtly sowing doubt about Yuri in the minds of the staff and even Tu Tieu's mother. Behind the scenes, she destabilizes Yuri's finances, spreads false accusations, and engineers situations to make him appear untrustworthy. She cunningly convinces Tu Tieu to sign documents without realizing their consequences, gaining control over the farm and company assets step by step. With her calculated moves, Lynn positions herself to take over the family estate, leaving Uri and Tu Tieu vulnerable and struggling to protect their home, their family, and their future together.